Our story, a classic tale of forbidden love and haunting secrets, began with a woman who had spent her life searching for a home, Jane Eyre. From the start, she had been an orphan, enduring a miserable childhood defined by poverty and rejection. She had been consistently reminded that she was plain, poor, and undeserving of true affection. The young orphan protagonist, Jane Eyre, aged 10, was living at Gateshead Hall with her wealthy, cruel aunt, Mrs. Reed, and her 3 cousins, the cold Eliza, the spoiled Georgiana, and the vicious bully John Reed. On a cold, rainy day, Jane was excluded from the family's cozy drawing-room gathering because Mrs. Reed deemed her not sociable and childlike. Jane retreated to the adjoining breakfast room, hid behind a red curtain in the window seat, and found solace reading Bewick's History of British Birds, whose dark, solitary images mirrored her feelings of isolation. Jane's hiding spot was discovered by her cousin John Reed, a large, bilious schoolboy, age 14, who habitually terrorized her. He verbally abused her, reminded her that she was a penniless dependent who ought to beg, and struck her for her impudence. When she refused to show proper deference, he violently hurled a heavy book at her. The book hit Jane, cutting her head and causing her to bleed. The physical pain and terror overwhelmed her fear, and she snapped, calling John a wicked and cruel boy, a murderer, and comparing him to the Roman emperors, Nero, Caligula. John screamed and attacked her, grabbing her hair. The resulting frantic struggle was interrupted by Mrs. Reed, Bessie, the nurse, and Miss Abbott, the maid. Instead of punishing the bully John, Mrs. Reed immediately blamed Jane for attacking her master, calling her a fury. As punishment, Jane was dragged away and locked in the dreaded Red Room, an experience she feared more than anything. But Jane was forged in this loneliness. Her strength was her spirit, her resilience, and her sharp mind. After years of harsh schooling, she finally emerged, a young woman yearning for a decent life, her independence earned through sheer will. Her only hope for a living was to take the daunting position of a governess. That path led her north, to a place as cold and imposing as any she had ever known, the great, brooding, Gothic estate of Thornfield Hall. It immediately felt secretive and immense. Jane was introduced to the kind housekeeper, Mrs. Fairfax, and her student, a lively French girl named Adele. For the first time, Jane felt a fragile sense of peace. Mrs. Fairfax was warm and considerate, moving Jane to a smaller, cozier room next to her own, rather than the dreary and solitary, large front chambers. Jane found the hall, staircase, and long gallery leading to the rooms to be chill and vault-like, suggesting cheerless ideas of space and solitude, which she contrasted with the eerie, church-like architecture. Once in her own small, comfortable room, Jane felt a surge of gratitude and relief, recognizing she was in a safe haven after her difficult journey and past traumas at Gateshead and Lowood. She prayed, feeling both weary and content, and slept soundly without fear. Jane woke up to a bright, sunny room furnished in a comfortable modern style, blue chintz curtains, papered walls, carpeted floor. This was a stark, happy contrast to the bare planks and stained plaster of Lowood. This improved setting instantly lifted her spirits, and she believed a fairer era of life, filled with new hope and possibilities, was beginning for her. The true master of the house, however, was still a mystery. Edward Fairfax Rochester was often away on secretive journeys, leaving the hall quiet and still. Jane found a somber beauty in the deep stone corridors and the wide, empty library. She enjoyed the quiet solitude, unaware that the air she breathed was heavy with a hidden past and dangerous secrets. Then, one cold afternoon, Jane was out walking the lonely lanes when she encountered a furious horseman thrown from his mount, a man with a massive brow, dark eyes, and a commanding voice. She had finally met Mr. Rochester, and everything at Thornfield Hall changed forever. From the moment of their first dramatic meeting on the lonely road, the master of Thornfield Hall began to reveal himself. Edward Rochester was a complex man, cynical, often abrupt, but possessing a fierce intelligence and a hidden kindness that captivated Jane. He saw beyond her plain exterior, engaging her mind in a way no one ever had before. Their evenings were spent in deep conversation. He spoke of his travels, his regrets, and his often melancholy view of the world. Jane, in turn, felt comfortable enough to share her own sharp observations and steadfast spirit. It was an unconventional bond, defying the strict social rules of the time, and Jane found herself irrevocably drawn to his difficult, passionate nature. But even as their connection deepened, the strange occurrences at Thornfield continued. The servants often spoke of Grace Poole's eccentricities, attempting to explain away the unsettling sounds. Yet, Jane couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister lurked within the house, just beyond her sight. One night, the terror became palpable. Jane was awakened by the smell of smoke. Rochester's bed curtains were ablaze, and he was sleeping, oblivious to the danger. With quick thinking and courage, Jane extinguished the fire, saving his life. Rochester, shaken and grateful, looked at Jane with an intensity that promised more than just thanks. He hinted at a long, sad story, a mystery that bound him. Jane had saved his life, but she was only just beginning to uncover the terrible truth that held her beloved Thornfield in its grasp. In the lush, overgrown garden of Thornfield, beneath the light of a summer moon, Rochester finally spoke the words Jane had scarcely dared to dream of. He confessed his love, claiming he needed her fierce little spirit to save him from his past. Jane, unable to contain the deep emotion she had held prisoner for so long, finally surrendered. "I will be your companion. I will be your Jane." A wedding was planned with shocking speed. Rochester insisted on showering Jane with gifts, expensive jewels, silks, and fine lace. But Jane, fiercely independent, felt a strange discomfort. She did not want to lose herself, the very spirit he claimed to love, beneath a pile of expensive finery. She pleaded with him, "I will not be yours till I am your wife. I am still myself. I have only been planted in a new place." Jane's joy was constantly shadowed by Rochester's unpredictable behavior. He was often called away, returning moody and distracted. He pressured her, hurried the arrangements, and brushed off her questions about his secretive past. Her intuition, the only reliable guide she had ever known, began to sound a clear alarm. This happiness was too volatile, too sudden, and too fragile to last. And then there was the house itself. The chill and the mystery were relentless. The chilling, disembodied laughter continued to echo from the secluded third floor, dismissed by Rochester as the peculiar servant Grace Poole. But Jane had seen glimpses of a monstrous figure, heard sounds of a physical struggle, and knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that Thornfield held a dark and buried past. This was not just a strange maid, this was a terrifying secret. The wedding morning dawned, deceptively quiet. In the small, ancient church, Jane Eyre stood beside Edward Rochester. The love in her heart was profound, but the dread was a tangible, cold presence. The moment the question was posed, "Is there any impediment to this marriage?" Jane knew, deep down, the answer was yes. A voice from the back of the church shattered the silence. "The marriage cannot go forward." A solicitor, Mr. Briggs, stepped forward. His words were delivered with cold, legal finality. Edward Fairfax Rochester was already married. The bridegroom, Jane's beloved, he had a wife still living. Rochester, enraged but defeated, confessed the horrifying, unbelievable truth. His living wife, Bertha Mason, was real. She was not only real, but hidden away at Thornfield Hall, a woman driven to utter, dangerous madness by her family's history. He had kept her secret bound and locked away, hoping to bury his past forever. To prove his terrible claim, Rochester led the stunned wedding party back to Thornfield, to the third floor, and the infamous locked room. There, they found her, Bertha Mason. A wild, disheveled figure, her face distorted by pure insanity, emitting a horrifying guttural cry as she lunged at her captors. The hidden mystery of Thornfield was revealed in one agonizing moment. Jane's world was shattered, but her spirit remained unbroken. To stay would be to live a lie and compromise her moral soul. With a heart agonizingly divided between love and independence, she made her choice. She walked away from the man she loved, away from the hope of a home, to face an uncertain world, alone but free. The search for her true home had begun anew. Jane Eyre was broken, walking away from the man she loved, choosing integrity over comfort. Her escape was not the end of her suffering, it was the start of a new trial. She wandered, penniless and starving, on the vast, bleak moor, her survival dependent on the harsh mercy of nature. After days of near starvation, Jane collapsed on the doorstep of a simple house, a remote cottage inhabited by the Rivers family. She was rescued by Diana, Mary, and their severe but handsome brother, St. John. They offered her not just shelter, but kindness and genuine respect, giving Jane her first real sense of family. In this peaceful haven, Jane began her recovery. She took up work as a village schoolmistress, finding quiet purpose in service. But the greatest surprise was yet to come. Through a twist of fate, Jane discovered that the Rivers siblings were not just her friends, they were her long-lost cousins. And miraculously, an uncle had left her a fortune, transforming Jane from a poor governess into a wealthy, independent woman overnight. Now financially free, Jane shared her inheritance equally with her cousins. But St. John Rivers, the family patriarch, saw in Jane not just a relative, but a potential partner in his grand spiritual ambition. St. John was a missionary, fiercely devoted to service, but cold and emotionally rigid. St. John appealed not to Jane's heart, but to her duty. He believed Jane had the intellectual fortitude to be his companion in his grueling mission work abroad, demanding she sacrifice all personal passion for a higher, lonely purpose. He proposed marriage, a marriage of convenience, devoid of love. The dilemma was agonizing. Should she choose a life of noble, passionless service alongside her cousin, or cling to the memory of the fiery, imperfect love she had lost? Days later, St. John pressed his case, urging her toward the missionary path. Jane felt her independence threatened once again, this time by the chains of duty and religion. The pressure from St. John became almost unbearable. He gave Jane a deadline, demanding she deny her own heart and follow him. Jane nearly succumbed, prepared to sacrifice her passionate nature for the sake of spiritual rectitude. But in her deepest moment of crisis, a miracle occurred. Out of the midnight silence, carried on the wind across the desolate moor, Jane heard a voice, clear, distinct, and unmistakable, the voice of Edward Rochester, calling her name.
Jane! Jane! Jane!
It was a psychic call of desperation and need, shattering her resolve to leave England. The call was undeniable. Jane knew instinctively that she had to return to him, not as a dependent, but as a wealthy, self-possessed woman. She left the Rivers house immediately, returning to Thornfield, ready to face whatever fate, or secret, awaited her beloved. As Jane approached the familiar roads, she found silence where she expected activity. When she crested the final hill, she saw it. Thornfield Hall was a ruin. It had been reduced to a blackened shell by a devastating fire. The imposing, brooding manor, which had served as the cage for Rochester's secret, was gone. The secret was out. The tragedy had been caused by the mad Bertha Mason, who, during a violent frenzy, had set the house ablaze. Rochester, in a final act of courage, had tried to save his wife and the servants. Bertha had perished in the flames, but her tragedy secured Jane's freedom. But Rochester himself had paid a terrible price. In his heroic efforts, he was gravely injured, blinded and rendered maimed in one hand. The fierce, masterful, difficult man Jane had loved was now physically broken, living in seclusion at a remote manor, needing care and guidance. Jane found him alone, humbled by fate and the fire. He was no longer the imposing master, but a vulnerable man dependent on her. Jane, now financially independent and having resisted the moral coercion of St. John, was his equal. She came to him not out of duty or desperation, but out of pure, deep, enduring love. The power dynamic that had complicated their relationship was finally gone. Jane's independence and Rochester's humility allowed them to unite as true equals. She became his eyes, his support, and his wife, embracing the difficult, passionate man she had loved all along. In the end, Jane Eyre found what she had searched for her entire life. Not wealth, not ease, but a true home and a soulmate. She had returned to the heart that called her, having earned her fire, her fortune, and her forever. Her story remains the ultimate testament to a woman's unwavering spirit and the enduring power of genuine love.